The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the SageWorks webinar, Interviewer Do's and Don'ts for Finding the Right Candidate. Today's webinar is hosted by SageWorks, the leader in financial analysis of privately held companies. And today's webinar is facilitated by Katie McConnell, who is the Director of Recruitment and Development at Galena LLP. I'll introduce our speaker further in a moment, but before I do that, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items on the next slide. On the next slide, we will see that first thing that you'll notice is that we'll be sending out a copy of the slides to you via email as well as a recording of this webinar. So if you have any questions or things that you feel like you've missed, we'll go back and we will check out what we've covered here today, and you can do that by just accessing things through your email that we'll follow up on within the next 2 days. Another thing that you should know is that you're on mute so that you don't have to worry about any background noise, any people coming in and out of the room while you're here with us today. But that does mean that you won't be able to ask us questions, and we want to know what your questions are. We want to have feedback from you. So if you look on the panel that should be on the right side of your screen, there's a chat box where you can write in any of the questions that you have about the content here today. That's really important to us, mainly because it's a helpful way for our presenters to guide the presentation in a way that's going to most help you and to provide as much feedback and information that can help you. Secondly, we'll have polling questions throughout this webinar, and you're encouraged to answer those, and those will help us keep track of today's involvement from the attendees for everything that we have going on with our CPE credit today. And then finally, at the end, we will have a brief Q&A of our webinar so that our speaker will be able to address any of the questions that you have. Before I jump into, again, introducing our speaker today, I'd like to go to the next slide where I'll quickly show you a little bit about SageWorks, about what we do. We've been around for the past 20 years, and we are a financial information company that provides accounting, financial analysis, and business valuation technology solutions to financial services, to financial firms, to financial accountants. And our mission is to make complicated financial information easier to understand and analyze. And we provide web-based solutions. And we don't provide web-based solutions and kick you out the door, but instead what we do is we partner with people with what we like to call technology partnerships and help you understand how you can use our software and our technology to help scale your practice and to become your client's trusted advisor. So these data, our data and our applications are used by thousands of financial institutions and accounting firms across North America. And a couple of awards that we've gotten over the past couple of years, we were named to the Incorporated 5,000 list of fastest growing privately held companies in the United States, as well as we were named to Deloitte's Technology Fast 500. And we also got an NC Tech Award for excellence in customer service. So that's a little bit about us. And again, we've been around for the past 20 years working with accounting firms, banks, and credit unions, and as well as valuation firms to help provide the best analysis for privately held companies that we can. And we also have the largest real-time database of privately held company financial statements in the United States. So that's enough about us, but ultimately what I'd like to draw our attention to today is our speaker, who is awesome. She is a great thought leader in the industry, and I would highly recommend her. She's very active on LinkedIn. You can actually go and find her page. At the very end of our presentation today, we have some contact information for her. But Katie is a licensed CPA with a background in public accounting and talent acquisition. And so Katie has been involved with several startup companies as well. So she's really somebody who has a holistic picture of really anywhere that you find yourself in a business world and how you're trying to bring people on board to your company, to your firm. And she currently serves as the Director of Recruitment and Development for Galena LLP, which is a public accounting firm where she leads the recruitment and training departments of the firm. She also launched and leads an executive search service line within the firm where she performs recruitment and hiring services for all of her clients. So Katie is also heavily involved in the Sacramento community where she lives and is a frequent speaker with organizations throughout California. You can find her publications on LinkedIn Pulse, and her passions include helping businesses grow, art, and of course wine. She has been quoted in a variety of industry publications on topics including hiring and developing talent. And so with that introduction, I'd like to hand it over to Katie, who is going to cover things today. But first, before I do that, I almost forgot, we have to cover the CPE instructions because that is something that is going to help all of us. So actually, before I hand it over to her, the first things that I'd like to cover is that ultimately you will get an email with all the CPE instructions after this. So if you miss it right here, don't worry about it. Don't be trying to grab pens and write this information down because it will all be emailed to you. But the thing that you do need to pay attention to are the digits that we'll show you today on our webinar, which you will then go and register on a website later. So throughout the webinar, we'll give you 2 digits of overall 6-digit course code, and it will be given out 3 separate times during the webinar. And after the slide changes, you will not receive the digits again, so make sure you're paying attention when we do that, and I'll verbally announce that as well as show it for a couple seconds. Another thing is you must be present throughout the webinar to receive CPE. So please don't walk away from your screen. Please answer all the poll questions, and please show involvement because that will help us to make sure that you get the CPE that you deserve. And then after the webinar, again, you'll be emailed all these instructions, and you'll be able to follow up and get your CPE credit. So thank you again, and finally, I will actually hand it over to Katie.
All right, thank you, Zach, and hello, everybody. Thanks for being here today. As Zach mentioned, I'm Katie McConnell with Galena LLP. So I hope we're all ready to venture into the exciting world of interviewing. Today, we're going to discuss some best practices for structuring an interview, what to ask in an interview, getting value out of all of your interviews, even the bad ones, and creating a positive candidate experience. And I would like to keep it interactive, so please feel free to message in your questions as we go. I understand we also have time at the end for a Q&A session as well. And as Zach mentioned, this is based on an article published on LinkedIn Pulse, so I've included the link here, and I believe everyone will get the slides, so you will have access to that link. And I did want to caveat by saying that all of this is my opinion and findings based on the hiring and interview experience I've had and what I recommend to my clients. So please feel free to disagree. If you do, please feel free to contact me. I welcome the controversy. So let's set the stage. So this is the foundation for our discussion today. We're talking about the interview. So we're making the assumption that you've already reviewed a million resumes, you've conducted the phone screen, and you're basically at the first interview stage with bringing these folks into your office. Oh, and it looks like we're already at our first polling question, which is, what is your greatest challenge with respect to the interview process? And we'll give that a couple of moments.
All right, so our results are in, and the way that people answered to what is your greatest challenge with respect to the interview process is that 19% say that managing the interview flow is their greatest challenge, 67% say that asking the right questions is their greatest challenge, 8% say that the follow-up is the greatest challenge, and 6% say other. Katie, what are your thoughts about this?
Perfect. Well, it looks like we'll spend a little bit more time on asking the right questions. All right, so let's launch right into talking about the effective interview. So, of course, the effective interview is professional, organized, and well-structured. candidate-centric, which I want to spend a lot more time talking about as we navigate through the discussion today, and leaves the candidate feeling positive about the entire interview experience. So some examples of that might be a sign-in at the front with a welcome and the candidate's name, the personal touch there, maybe letting your front desk receptionist know who's coming in so that she can address them by name. I like to provide an agenda to the candidate ahead of time with the names of those that they'll be interviewing with so that they can prepare adequately and do their homework as well. So when the candidate arrives, it's all about the candidate experience. So we talked about that welcome sign, giving the candidate something to leave with, so maybe a folder about the company with a one-page about the background of the firm or company, a giveaway or some kind of swag item, which is also, of course, good branding for your company. And I really wanted to highlight the millennials piece of that because, as we all know or we've heard, that millennials are the trophy or the me generation. Everyone wants to feel special. And who doesn't love feeling special no matter when they were born, but especially with millennials, considering how do I feel when I come to work every day, which is as much as important as the bottom line salary and benefits and the job and opportunity alone. So that experience starts as soon as the candidate enters the building. So a few best practices for structuring the interview. Do's and don'ts. Before the interview, send that confirmation email that includes the agenda or at least the names of the interviews, maybe the address, how to park, where to park if you're validating parking, details like that. Make sure you give a resume to everyone who's interviewing the candidate. This is really important because we need to know that everyone involved in the interview process is clued in. There's nothing worse than going to an interview and sitting down with someone who has no clue who you are and is looking at your resume for the first time. Ensure that you've secured a meeting space, or if you're meeting in offices, cell phones are turned off, be present, office looks professional. And then also deciding on next steps. And what I mean by that is, what is your interview and hiring plan? And make sure everyone is on the same page about that. So is this a first and final? Will there be a second interview? When can the candidate expect that you'll follow up? And let everyone who's meeting with that candidate know so that if they're asked, everyone's sort of singing the same song, if you will. A few more do's and don'ts. During the interview, and we'll talk more about this as we go on, but start by presenting an agenda or providing a summary of what the candidate can expect through the process. So I like to start with something like, thanks for coming in. We will have you meet with several people today, which is listed on the agenda in front of you, and I will see you out at the conclusion of your interview. And that way they know what to expect through the process. And begin by introducing yourself, and then you can focus on that candidate-centric experience. Really what this all comes down to is remaining in control of the interview process. And it looks like Zach has the first course code for us. Whoops, yes, I need to show it to you. There we go.
All right, there it is. Okay, so our first course code, which is the first 2 digits of our overall 6-digit course code. So right now you'll only see the first 2. And then on the next time we show a course code, you will not see the first 2. So make sure you pay attention that our first 2 digits are 2, 3. That is in 23, or Michael Jordan's number when he played for the Bulls. He also had 45, but right now we're just paying attention to 23. So you have that, you see that, and now we'll continue to move on.
All right. So sample interview agenda. And this is a format that can really be used if you do a panel style, if you do one-on-one, if you do a round robin with several people. It works as a general formula. But really introducing yourself first. I really want to highlight the 1-minute self-intro, and we'll talk about that more. So I don't want to steal my own thunder here. So number 2, turn it over to the candidate to introduce themselves. Then a Q&A, an open forum discussion, and then a closing. And the closing is really where you say what happens next. We'll call you next week. We're hoping to make a decision by Friday, or please feel free to follow up with us next week, so on and so forth. So that's kind of my general formula that I like to follow for running the interview, from intro of candidate all the way through exiting them back out the door. Second polling question. Are you already structuring your interviews this way and providing the candidate experience-focused extras, as in the sign at the front or maybe some kind of giveaway?
All right, the poll is closed down and the results are in. 36% said yes, that they are currently providing candidate experience, and they focused on providing extras to help their candidate feel involved. And 64% said no. Katie, is this what you were thinking?
Actually, that's a little higher than what I thought, so good job, everybody. I'm impressed. All right, so moving on. Pulling back out the soapbox to talk more about keeping that interview candidate-centric. This is probably the biggest offense that I see when I sit in on interviews. And the interview loves to tell their story. They get caught up in storytelling mode, and the next thing you know, 20 minutes have gone by. He's having the time of his life, and he knows absolutely nothing about the candidate. And a savvy candidate knows, and they coach them on this if they have career coaches or work through a third-party recruiter, that the more time the interviewer spends talking about himself, the better experience he will have giving the interview, increasing the probability that the candidate will get the job. So pay attention to that, guys, when you are sitting in an interview. The amount of time that you ask a question and then you self-identify, me too, I like to do that too. And then the next thing you know, you're talking about yourself and you think, wow, I really like this guy. But you don't actually have that much substance to go off of. I don't want to read this to you, but a little word track here. If the candidate does ask you a question, and in my example, why did you decide to work here? The bottom line is essentially provide a brief answer and turn the conversation back around on the candidate. So you're successfully navigating the savvy candidate Jedi mind trick here. Next, do and don't of the interview process is to discuss the job description. I like to have a copy of that available during the interview with my interviewees and also with the candidate. And questions that you can ask are things like, is there anything on this job description that you're uncomfortable with or that you've never done before? Not that there's a right or wrong answer, but just to get an idea of how honest the candidate is and kind of what their skill set is against what you're looking for. It also keeps the interview focused on the role and the job and keeps you from navigating over back into that what do we have in common territory where at the end of the interview, you discover very little about their technical background. Tell me about a time when. Personally, I'm not a fan of the situational interview questions unless they're future-oriented. So as I say in my slide, I don't like the interview to be an obstacle course about the past. And frankly, I don't know about you, but I have a lot of situations where I didn't exactly do it the right way the first time. So I'd rather talk about what I did, how I botched it up, and what I learned from that and how I would do it differently. So my suggestion to you guys is to tailor those, tell me about a time when you faced a difficult situation, to spin it with, and tell me what you learned about from that experience, or tell me about what you would do next time. I think the candidate also expects the situational interview question, so this kind of throws them a curve to show some critical thinking and push them to the next level there. Which brings us to our next polling questions is, are you currently using situational behavioral type questions?
All right, we're waiting for our last few answers to the poll question, and we'll present the results. All right, the results are in. 67% said yes, they do rely on situational behavioral type interview questions, and 33% say no. So it's about 2/3 yes and 1/3 no. Is that what you're thinking, Katie?
Wow, I had no idea. I wanted to ask this type of question just to see. It's definitely not my style, but I know it's traditional interview type style. So curious on, I would love to just spend a separate conversation talking with everyone about that and how that has worked out. So hopefully some of this is of value and you guys might change your approach a little bit with how you ask those types of questions. I definitely think the value is there, but there's a lot more we can be getting out of it. So, moving on, let's talk about focusing on culture fit. So bust out that core values document and talk about it. which should be really easy, right? Because your company already lives and breathes that document every day, right? Right. But things like, what is the candidate looking for? Do they have a passion? Do they have a spark? Do they have the entrepreneurial spirit that, let's say, your company in particular is really, it's a core value for you guys? Do the company's goals align with the mission and goals of the candidate? Are you guys on the same page? And don't rehash the entire resume. I prefer to spend more time talking about what makes a good fit than what the resume looks like, because your phone screen and the technical interview should have really already gathered that information before we get to the in-person stage. And I also, as a total side note, also strongly encourage that you put your core values in the offer letter. We're not really going to talk about offer letters today, but that's something to consider as well. And a don't, the sales pitch. I think we have a tendency to do this if the candidate is someone that we really want, and we want to kind of ram the opportunity down their throat and sell them on it so we can lock them down and hire them. But my opinion on that is, don't just sell the opportunity. Answer truthfully and authentically about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we have Clint there from Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Be transparent about the challenges that your company faces, and you may also end up getting some insights or some free consulting advice from the candidate when you're candid about the challenges that you have. And the last thing that we want is a hire that 30 days in on the job is shocked that things aren't exactly as you presented them. Better to let them know what's good, what the challenges are going to be in the role, and you have the best chance of receiving that kind of authenticity in return from your candidate. So we'll spend some more time on this since it sounds like this is an area that folks are particularly interested in. Some do's for effective interview questions. I like to ask what most attracted you to this opportunity. I find that that gives me some valuable information about why they applied for the job in the first place. Is it just a job? Is it a career? What do you know about my company that's of interest? Sometimes candidates tell me things like, I'm just applying everywhere. Anyone will give me an interview. Well, that kind of shows me a lack of strategy and that perhaps you're not being very strategic about applying for this job. What are you passionate about? I like to see kind of a spark in someone, even if their answer doesn't have anything to do with my job. It's just something about that person and the characteristic they have that aligns with my core values. Tell me about an area for improvement and how are you working on that? That's a spin on the age-old strengths and weaknesses question. I just don't like the cliche of tell me a strength, tell me a weakness. So talking about an area for improvement and how they're already actively working on making that better just puts a more positive spin on things. And what makes a good fit for you? I really like to spend a lot of time on this one with candidates to ask them what they think a good fit means for them and how that aligns with my company. Some more interview question do's. What frustrates you? I love this one because it really tells me how authentic the candidate is. If they say, oh, nothing frustrates me, either they're a far better person than I am or they're giving me a line of BS, right? Or alternatively, if they provide me with a really off-the-wall answer, that can garner a lot of insights about a candidate. Further, what do you think will be your greatest challenge in the role? That one I really like because it sort of peels back the layers of honesty with a candidate of what challenges does this pose for you versus what I see, and how can we get on the same page and kind of go back to that good, the bad, and the ugly there. And lastly, what is the job you want after this one? I like this because it's controversial. It catches people off guard. I love to catch people off guard and get them outside of their comfort zone in an interview because oftentimes interviews are so rehearsed. That's a question that they're very rarely ever going to expect, and you can kind of see how they react under pressure a little bit. Which brings us to our next polling question. Based on everything we've just discussed, what is the greatest change you will be making to the interview format?
All right, we're almost to 90% of attendees voting, and we're about to close down the poll. All right, I'm closing out of it. The results are in, and it looks like 8% are providing extra touches. Example, welcome sign. 22% are focusing on keeping the interview more candidate-focused. 9% want to focus on not making the interview a sales pitch, and 57% said they want to be changing the type of questions that they ask, and 4% are saying other.
And I'm curious to know what that other is.
Yeah, if anybody has some other information on their mind, they're more than welcome to send that in the questions box, and it's something that we can address later if there's that other.
All right. Well, thank you, Zach. I think we also have the second course code.
All right. So the second two-digit course code is 373737. All right. We're back into the rest of the interviewers' do's and don'ts. All
right. So no one really wants to be put to sleep with all the legal stuff. That's what our attorneys are for, right? But quick reference, we have to talk about it since we're talking about the interview. Illegal interview questions. So I'm sure you guys are all familiar with this, but you can't ask about age. You can't ask about marital status. You can't ask questions like, do you have any children? Do you have any tattoos? Are you in good physical health? Exception there if it is required for the specific job, as in a warehouse listing or inventory manager or something like that. The rule of thumb, don't ask anything that could potentially come back and be used against you as discrimination, so use your good judgment. If you're not sure, of course, consult with HR or outside counsel. And I do get asked sometimes, what happens if the candidate discloses this kind of information in an interview? So if they offer up, oh, I'm 56 years old and my children are in college, just completely ignore it and blow past it. Sometimes it can be a point of connection if you end up talking about your children with them. That's okay. I try to stay away from it anyways and just kind of not acknowledge it. So 2 questions that I recommend you always ask. And I like to ask these at the very end of the interview. Questions are, do you have any concerns that I can address? And is there anything else that we did not discuss today that you feel that I should know? Guarantee stuff comes out during these questions. I very rarely have a candidate that just kind of looks at me, blinks, and says, nope. Usually that's the time that they hold until the very end to ask the random question that just didn't seem like it came up during the interview. And there's a lot of valuable information there. That's the time that they ask about vacation policy and how many hours they have to work, where I can kind of go, maybe this person doesn't want to put in very many hours, and I can kind of see what their true motivations are. Or maybe that's where they ask about growth and promotion opportunities, and I can really kind of see that that's where their values and motivations are aligned. And then I can have a long-term or a conversation with them about long-term potential, and that could have just been something that didn't otherwise come up. So absolutely recommend this. This was something that I actually picked up from LinkedIn that they do in their candidate interviews in the Bay Area, and I loved it, and it has always proved interesting and valuable. So let's talk about getting value out of the interview. Good or bad, there's always value to be garnered from an interview. So source information. This is probably one of the most important pieces of the interview process that's also overlooked. So let's kind of remove the mystery from that a little bit. It's a great way to learn about market information and ensure that you're being competitive and learn about what's going on in the general job market. And it's also a great opportunity to have a transparent conversation about what piece of your opportunity is most important to the candidate in the event that you go to a negotiation. So maybe it's salary, time off. You can craft a package that your candidate will be more likely to take if you know what else they're looking at. So ask questions like, what other opportunities are you considering? And obtain more information about those opportunities to the extent that they will disclose that information to you. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how to get that information. My rule of thumb is not to hire someone that's unwilling to engage in that conversation. And I'm not saying that the candidate should bear everything. It's definitely reasonable for them to withhold the name of other companies or make vague statements like, well, the other offer is within the same salary range. But what I look for is a transparent conversation of, yes, I'm evaluating several other opportunities in the same salary range. What I'm really looking for is work-life balance or the ability to telecommute or whatever they're looking for. I also use this as an opportunity to assess strategy. So for example, in the public accounting space, if they're evaluating my firm, which is a large regional firm, and they're also evaluating an international firm that does completely different clients than me, and they disclose that to me, I want to know why. I want to know what it is about my company and that other opportunity that attracts them, because they're very different opportunities. And it can open up a dialogue. But if they're unwilling to talk with me about any of it, I find it to be a little bit of a red flag of transparency as far as how that aligns with our company culture. And maybe that's different for you in your particular situation. So peeling that back a little bit more, how to navigate someone who's weary. And this is a wordy slide, so I'll paraphrase here. But bottom line is ask why the person is hesitant to discuss your questions and let them know why you're asking them. So it's not a deposition or an interrogation. Again, that's what our attorneys are for. It's an interview. So asking, are you currently looking at any other opportunities? And if so, I want to know what they look like and what's influencing your process. And if they push back and say, you know, I'm not sure I want to tell you that. Okay, well, the reason why I want to know is that I want to make sure that we're being transparent and there aren't any surprises. You're a really important candidate to us. We like you a lot. We want to, you know, if we feel like you're the right fit, we don't want to lose it over a couple $1,000s or something that we can get creative with just because we didn't have the conversation about it. And I find that that tends to open up the candidate and flow the dialogue a little bit better. Sometimes they're just going to tell you no anyways, in which case I get suspicious, but ultimately it's up to you. So let's talk a little bit about when it gets weird. And this slide is, I just find it hilarious, but the guy says, what weaknesses do you consider to be your greatest weaknesses? And he says, my table manners are atrocious and I smoke crack. So the bottom line is sometimes things get really awkward in an interview and you know that you're not going to be moving forward with a candidate. So what do you do? Well, wrap it up quickly. Be honest that you don't see it being a fit, and keep it professional, because remember that candidate experience that they could be a prospective customer or a client. But don't feel like you have to go through the full interview process. So in these instances, I say wrap up the interview quickly. Don't cut off the candidate or be rude. Don't start checking your phone or make it very clear that there's a million other places you'd rather be. But it's okay to tell the candidate, you know, I just don't see this being a fit. Be upfront and transparent. Let them know. They will also appreciate it, and it will also spare you the time and the follow-up rejection costs. And lastly, and this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways, follow your intuition. Pay attention to your gut. If it's a no, it's probably a no, so don't try to convince yourself. All right, so after the interview is over, this should go without saying as well, but it happens all too often. Follow up, call and communicate the next steps to the candidate, and ask for feedback on the process. Whether or not my candidate got the job, I like to ask them how they felt about the interview process and if there was anything that I could do differently to enhance the process for them. Sometimes they will say no, and sometimes I do get some good constructive feedback. Keep in touch and check in periodically, and look at that candidate as a potential referral source, a potential client, and a potential customer. The candidate has invested a lot of time in the application process, in the review process, and so it's very important that you give them that good experience and leave them feeling good about the company, regardless of whether or not they got the job. Not hearing back after the interview is a great way to tank the relationship and make yourself look like a jerk. And keep in touch and check in. Foster the relationship like you do anyone else in your professional network. A lot of companies have an ATS or maybe Salesforce to assist with that kind of candidate touch. Of course, you can also talk to SageWorks about that. And the don't make your follow-up an email regardless of the next step. I prefer the personal touch of calling the candidate. They've invested their time in me too to come in and build the relationship face-to-face with me. If I need to call them and tell them they didn't get the job, I can man up and call them. I don't need to send them an email in the cover of darkness to let them know that they didn't get the job. And that goes back to candidate experience. And I actually wish we had a polling question in here about how many of you are emailing versus the phone call, but to me it's important to make the call. So what if they're not the one? Again, notify with a phone call, not an email, and be careful what you disclose. a lot of times the candidate will say, well, why didn't you hire me? My advice is to keep it positive with something like, we identified someone that was a perfect match. It's okay to also tell them why you didn't select them. Maybe if it's, the technical expertise wasn't there, or we really needed someone with construction background and you just didn't have that skill set. And that was a hurdle that we just couldn't get over, but we'd love to keep in touch and follow up with you as time goes on. Or maybe it's just, we had 2 amazing candidates and we only have 1 slot, and it was a very difficult decision. What I don't like to say is, I'm sorry we didn't give you the job. I'm not sorry. I made the decision not to hire the person. And that's actually what we have for content here. So we will wrap it up. We do have a couple more slides with SageWorks and a polling question before we get to the open Q&A. So Zach's going to talk with us a little bit about SageWorks and what they do before we open it up for question and answer here for the last 15 minutes of our discussion today.
Just like Katie said, that we are about to have a little bit of a Q&A after we work through some of the slides that I have here on SageWorks. I did want to take a little bit of time to show you about the company and about who we are, what we do. And honestly, it might be a question that you're asking is, why does this software company care about recruiting? Why are they wanting to get a thought leader to come and speak to you about recruiting? And that is because it's one of your main pain points. From all of the accountants that we talk to, from all the financial professionals that we speak with, it always comes back to recruiting. That recruiting is a very difficult thing. It's hard to get progressive and proactive accountants in the door to be a part of your staff, and it's also hard to train them. It's hard to get them to be leaders in the industry and to be somebody who's willing to carry the flag for the firm. And so one of the things that SageWorks solution does, we have 2 that we want to talk to you about that you can see on your screen, is ProfitSense and then SageWorks Valuation Solution. One is, which is ProfitSense, is for accountants, and then valuation is obviously for people who do business valuations, which can be accountants or just valuation professionals. But ultimately, these 2 software products end up helping you to attract progressive talent, help to train them to be proactive and to think about ways that they can take apart the financials of their clients and really identify ways to be a trusted advisor. And that comes with the help in both of these with automated reports, ways to standardize your documentation that you can share between staff and employees, and then also it helps to enhance your project management in the way that you scale your business and your firm. So we wanted to take a quick second to show you 2 one-minute videos really quickly. But again, ProfitSense is our accounting solution, and it's ultimately designed to help firms differentiate themselves and build client relationships, and ultimately to help them sell more advisory services as they perform their core accounting functions. Likewise, valuation helps valuation professionals streamline their workflow and generate accurate professional reports using the income, market, and asset approaches modeled after the SSVS #1 standards. And helps, ultimately, both of these help to scale existing firm processes and increase realization rates. So real quick, I'm going to show a video on ProfitSense, and then I'll show a video on our valuation solution as well.
Accountants to analyze their financial statements, but translating these statements into actionable insights for the client's business is not easy. Thousands of accounting firms from across the country are using ProfitSense by SageWorks. ProfitSense will change the way you consult with businesses by providing them a deeper understanding of their financial condition year-round with the patented and automated ProfitSense narrative report, which takes financial information and makes it come alive in the form of graphs, charts, and an easy-to-understand narrative. You can also benchmark your clients against their industry and tailor your recommendations for improvement using SageWorks real-time industry data. But poring over clients' financials and telling them what happened last year is only one aspect of your job. Helping your clients plan for the future and becoming a trusted business advisor is now more important than ever. With ProfitSense, you can perform projections and illustrate specific what-if scenarios to quickly show your clients the impact that certain changes will have on their cash flow or value of their business. As clients' needs and expectations are evolving, public accounting firms are using ProfitSense to identify new opportunities and sell more services to existing clients. Differentiate your firm and stop competing on price. ProfitSense. Request a demo today.
So that's our ProfitSense solution that I wanted to show you, and next I'll transition to our valuation solution, which is helpful if it's something that your firm is already doing or something that you're looking forward to provide in the future.
The process of properly valuing a business can be time-consuming and labor-intensive. SageWorks Valuation Solution is revolutionizing this process by saving you time without placing limits on your professional judgment. With ever-increasing regulation, it's important to use a solution that will provide you with a valuation system for compliance with AICPA's guidelines. SageWorks Valuation Solution commands consistency and drastically reduces the opportunity for mechanical error. With unlimited document tracking and storage, local commenting, and integrated report builder, everything is organized in one place. From financial analysis to report compilation, the easy-to-use online format grants global access and the most accurate commercial-grade valuation possible. Simplify the process of valuing a business. SageWorks Valuation Solution. Request a demo today.
And those are two short videos that we think do an excellent job at showing our solutions and the ways that they can help accounting firms and valuation professionals. And that's something that we just wanted to show you really quickly, and also point out that it is a way that can attract progressive talent and people who are proactive and wanting to dive deeper into financials and not just stay in the general ledger, but also help project out how business can improve and how you can become a trusted advisor. So on our next slide, we had a quick poll that we'd like to launch for you. And if you're interested in any of those, please let us know. All right, we're getting close to closing it down. If you wouldn't mind finishing up. All righty. Thank you for voting and helping us see that. So on our next slide, we're going to give out our third and final course code. So I hope that you've been tracking with us. The last two digits are 05. That is 05. And then we're going to continue on, and we're going to enter into our question and answer time. Just so you know, whenever we email these out, these will be on the slide. So if you have any questions for myself or Katie, if you want to pick Katie's brain or just get a little bit more insight about where you can find some of her thought leadership, please feel free to contact her. She loves to talk about this, and you can already tell how awesome of a thought leader she is. So right now we're going to go ahead and open up some time for questions and answers. If you haven't sent in your questions, go ahead and do that now. But for the most part, I think Katie has looked at some of the questions you sent in, so she will address some of those right now.
All right, so I have a couple of questions here, and please feel free to pop in your chat box with additional questions as we go. We have about 10 minutes to set aside here to chat a little bit. So one of the questions that came in was, what is the weirdest interview experience you've ever had? And I actually have so many because I interview probably on a crazy week. I probably do 40 interviews a week. I've had all kinds of interviews, but I have to say that probably the worst for me are the ones that are really nervous, because I tend to vibe off of that, and it kind of dampens the experience for me. It makes me really anxious. I had someone tell me all about waterless urinals for about 20 minutes and had to kind of figure out how to stop him so that I could end the interview. It was most bizarre. And if he's listening today, I hope the best for him. Another question that I see here is, what if someone wants to learn more about you? So I'm going to assume that that means as in they keep probing and we're trying to make that a candidate-centric experience, but the candidate keeps asking questions about you. How long have you worked here? Why did you come to work here? Why are you interested in the company? Again, go back to a brief answer and spinning it back to the candidate. So something like, I'm happy to share more, but I want to keep our time here focused on you. Let's come back to that at the end of our interview. And then go ahead and make a note of that so that you don't forget to revisit it. After you get through the bulk of the interview, during the Q&A time, after you ask those key, is there anything else I should know that we haven't talked about today type questions, you can then say, you know, I wanted to revisit with you those questions that you had. I'm happy to share some more with you about my background now that we've come to the end of our interview, and then take that time to speak about yourself rather than using the bulk of the interview to do that. So hopefully that helps. And Zach, did we have any other questions coming in?
Yes, we do. One that came up is, what if a candidate is insistent about asking more about you?
And I thought that we had just kind of addressed that question.
Okay. I'm sorry, that must have had a couple of there. My bad. So I'm going to pull up the questions right now. One of them that we have is, is it prudent to ask a candidate from a competitor lot about higher company activities?
I don't think it's appropriate. I mean, the goal of the interview would be to ask the candidate questions about whether or not they are a good fit for the job, not whether or not, you know, they're interested in committing corporate espionage with you. And frankly, I think if they're a really good candidate, they won't ask much about those, or they won't answer much about that anyways. And if they do, that may be someone that you want to think twice about, because they could turn around and do the same thing to you if you hire them. So I don't think that it's appropriate. I think keeping it focused on things like how much the salary is, what the bonus is, what the incentives with their competitor are, is really positive information, especially if you're trying to go after their employees. But questions about the types of corporate initiatives that they have going, not appropriate unless they come up in conversation. Or you're just really sneaky. Great question.
Okay. And here's another one. It's about repeat candidates. Have you ever gone back to a candidate who you had once turned away? Or what do you do with people who continue to apply but you just don't think they're a good fit?
Absolutely. So another great question. I'll take this in two pieces. First, have I ever gone back to someone who I've declined on? Yes, absolutely. Especially at the internship and lower level staff. We do keep those in our talent software, and we do periodic outreach with them. Also, especially for the millennial generation, I'm connected with them through LinkedIn. We have, you know, Facebook groups or other ways that we can stay plugged into them so that we can maintain relevance. Maybe they weren't a fit because they were just too green in their career, and 2 years down the road, after they've gone down the street, gotten some great training from a competitor, and they're burned out or looking for a change, I absolutely want to be the first person that they call. So just because they weren't a fit, yes, absolutely, I keep in touch with them and they can become a fit. It could have just been a matter of timing. That said, if they aren't a fit because, you know, they were one interview call away from a restraining order, or there were some other kind of outlying concerns, if you will, then no, I think that's a totally different situation. I mark them as such in our talent solution software as far as follow-ups go. And then that person, you know, they may receive our newsletter or whatnot, but I'm not going to continue to be in touch with them. That being said, I did receive a referral from a candidate who we passed on. We did not give him the job. he had a very positive experience with the company, and he did end up referring someone else into the firm. So candidate experience is so, so important that even if we have the honest conversation that, look, it's just not a fit and this is what went wrong, that respect factor is there and it can still lead to referrals. So no relationship is a bad one as far as I'm concerned unless you're entering into some kind of legal territory. The other half of that question, what do you do when someone won't go away? I think it comes down to honesty and transparency. A lot of times when I find when clients and candidates are calling, it's because they just want an answer and they don't know, and they're getting deferred a lot from people who are saying, oh, well, we haven't made a decision yet, or we'll check back next week, or they're kind of being strung along, and they just really want to know. They just want to hear. Just rip the Band-Aid off. Let me know it's not going to work out. Tell me why, and I'll go away.
That's great. Okay, well, this question kind of has to do with the first of that two-part question you just answered. But are there any other red flags that you would say that interviewers should be looking out for?
You know, I think it depends on the company culture. For me, the red flags that I look for are somebody that doesn't really want to travel, somebody that doesn't really want to work that hard. If they're asking a lot of questions about working remotely, work-life balance, hours, you know, vacation, that's a red flag for me. If you're a very sort of alternative style company, maybe that's not a red flag for you. I look at over-disclosure as well. And of course, I think when folks tend to be nervous, they tend to just want to tell me a lot of things that they shouldn't be telling me, which can get kind of weird. And it's my job to maintain control over that process and steer them in the right direction. Something else that I look for is if they have a boiling point or a frustration point. I actually had a candidate once, and I asked the question, what frustrates you? And he basically said, nothing, I don't get stressed out. And I kind of scoffed at him and said, really? Tell me more about that, because here's 5 things that make me crazy. How do you feel about that? And he actually started getting really worked up the more that I pushed on him and got really angry with me. So of course that's a red flag, and he didn't end up getting the job. You know, it turns out what frustrates him is being asked repeatedly what frustrates him. But things like that to me are red flags as well.
Okay, that's great. Another question we had was about asking about habits. One of the attendees actually asked about asking if candidate smokes.
Can't ask it. It's illegal.
Okay.
It can bring up question for discrimination. And frankly, as much as it's taboo now, or we, you know, would prefer not to have it in the workplace, you can't discriminate or not give someone the job over something like that.
Yeah. Straight up, can't do it.
Of course, what's that?
So straight up, just can't do it.
You just can't do it. And I'm not sure how that would come up in conversation. As you were running down the list of interview questions that you wanted to ask, that one would kind of definitely create an opportunity for potential discrimination. So you can't do it.
Okay. One question that came up too was talking about timing. I know everyone has a little bit of different length of time that they like to run their interviews. If you found a time frame that works good for you, like an hour, hour and a half, 30 minutes, what is typically a good amount of time to have an interview? And I guess another question added on to that is how many callbacks should there be? How many rounds of interviews should there be?
As far as timing, for the phone interview, which of course we didn't talk about today, I like to allot a half an hour. In the first 10 minutes, if it's not going well, I'll cut it off. If it goes really well, it's a 40-minute call, but I never really go over 30 minutes on a phone interview. In person, if it's a panel style, say myself and let's say 2 other people from my company, I think an hour is sufficient. I try to do about 10 minutes for intros, about 30 to 35 minutes for candidate Q&A, talking about their background and questions, a little bit of time on the back end for question and answer session, and then a 5-minute-ish close where we talk about next steps. And that gets us to about an hour. If you're doing kind of a round robin where you bring them in, you meet with them, then maybe you take them to Jim's office, then you take them to Sue's office, and you kind of bounce them around a little bit. I try to give 15 minutes to a half an hour to each interviewer to allow them sufficient time to run through that agenda, so that can look more like an hour and a half. But in being respectful of their time, especially because a lot of times they are employed elsewhere, I try not to go more than an hour and a half, and I will let them know up front. You can expect that this process will be about an hour to an hour and a half, and that way they know.
Okay.
And the other half of that question has fallen out of my brain. Can you please remind me what it was?
The other one was how many callbacks should there
Yes.
be, or how many rounds of interviews?
Thank you. I think it depends on how you run the process. If I, as a recruiter, bring them in after a phone interview and interview them by myself, then absolutely they should come back and meet some other folks from the company and who their supervisor is going to be. My preference is to run that concurrently. So after I've phone screened the candidate and I'm bringing them in-house for this process we've discussed today, I'm either going to do it as a panel interview or as kind of a round robin, in which case, to me, it could be a one-and-done interview. Potentially bring them back for a second to meet some other members of the team, or maybe it's a breakfast or a lunch or a happy hour or something a little bit less formal. I don't like to do more than 2 interviews, especially nowadays because the market's picking back up and we're seeing candidates move so quickly. It is difficult to kind of keep someone on the line for while we coordinate schedules, while we go through a first, a second, a third. Some people feel differently, that if the candidate's really committed to the process, you should be able to go through a very extensive process. And of course, it also depends on how high level the position is. That said, I try to keep it to a robust first and second and then have a decision after a second. But there are just exceptions in any case.
Okay. Well, I guess just because of our time constraint, our last question will be about assessing a candidate's technical experience. If you're hiring for a job position like accounting, how do you go about deciphering their level of technical expertise in a certain area and skill set?
This one is all over the board for me. I'll focus on finance because that's where the question sounds like came from. If they've come out of a competitor and it's a firm that I'm familiar with or that we've gone up against proposal-wise or worked on in the past, seen their work, I don't really focus at all on their technical expertise because I know that they've been well-trained. That information I can garner a bit from reference checks. I might ask them to, or they may want to bring in an evaluation to show their work history and performance. You can also tell by how quickly they've been promoted. If they've been with their company for 5 years and they've gone from staff to senior to supervisor, or maybe they've gone from accounting manager up to assistant controller, and they have a progression there, I know that they're growing professionally. So I don't really focus on the technical piece at all. I make a strong assumption that they're trained. For some other positions, especially if it's a specialized industry, I'll probe a little bit more and ask them to, tell me about a time that you've worked on a look-back calculation, or what's your experience with tax provision work, and talk to me about the types of clients that you worked on. And to me, it's more of a gut check of, do they present themselves as if they know what they're talking about, or are they fumbling through it? And you can tell right off the bat. I tend to not spend much time on the technical piece. Frankly, if I find the right culture fit, I can teach them how to do a tax return, or I can teach them how to close my books. I cannot teach them work ethic. I can't teach them how to get along with my team. So that is what I focus on in the interview more than the technical piece.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that insight, Katie. I really appreciate that, and I know everyone else does too. And I think that'll be the last question for today. And I know we had a few other questions, but we will work together to answer those questions and get them emailed to you. But thank you for attending today's webinar. I know we both appreciate it. And if you have any feedback for us, there's going to be a survey right afterwards, very short. Please let us know a little bit about you and a little bit about ways that we can make our webinars better and the ways that we can provide content that would be the best for you. But again, we will send out some copies of the slides and as well as a recording so that you have all the information that you need, and that you will also have our contact information and how to ask us questions. But we hope you have a great day, and thank you for attending.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Bye.